The death of a 5-year-old girl in outback Australia has reignited one of the country's most painful and controversial debates.
He was an innocent little baby.
For years I have raised concerns about the failures within child protection.
The child protection system was built to remove Aboriginal children from their families.
But why is the protection of Aboriginal children such a contentious topic? And what does it tell us about the ugly divide still present in Australia? The death of the 5-year-old girl, now known as Kumanjayi Little Baby, has shocked not just this remote part of the outback, but wider Australia too. And to understand its case and its importance, you've got to understand the multiple Aboriginal communities that live here in the Northern Territory. Now, we've been here for the past few days reporting on her death, and it's not the typical Australia many people think of. Bondi Beach, wealthy cities like Sydney. This is a town of 30,000 people. You can drive around it in just 10 minutes. The nearest city is Darwin, and that's 15 hours drive away. Kumanjayi Little Baby was the name given to the girl after she died. It's custom in many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities not to use people's names after death, so as not to disturb their spirit. She went missing on April the 26th, just hours after being put to bed in a home in an Aboriginal community. A massive search followed. Police, helicopters and hundreds of volunteers tried to find her.
People had hope. They came out en masse because they had hope that we were going to find this little baby girl.
5 days later, her body was found. A 47-year-old man has since been charged with her murder.
A family that loved, deeply loved their little girl, and anyone who's seen the pictures, it is obvious in those photos that this little girl was loved. Absolutely loved.
6 reports had been made about Kumanjayi Little Baby's welfare in the weeks leading up to her death, and concerns were raised by domestic violence shelter workers and a relative. There's no suggestion any of those reports were about the accused man, who only arrived in the community days before the girl's death and wasn't a relative. But the leaking of those reports has been criticised by Indigenous leaders. Catherine Little, who runs an organisation which works with Aboriginal children across the country, told me more about the system.
So in the Northern Territory, we have really strict mandatory reporting standards. Many of those notifications were things like lice. And instead of mandatory notifications, what we really should have is mandatory support.
She feels Aboriginal families are disproportionately targeted for often minor issues.
That shouldn't be something that becomes somebody's record for someone, unscrupulous person, to release at a time of great harm like this.
Now, 3 child protection workers in the Northern Territory have been stood down as investigators look into what was done or not done in Kumanjayi Little Baby's case. But the important context here is the history of the Australian governments and their involvement with Indigenous children. Across the Northern Territory, there have been years of policies which have proved controversial. Firstly, housing. On the outskirts of Alice Springs, there are 16 town camps like Kumanjayi Little Baby lived in. The camps first sprang up in the 1880s when Aboriginal people were displaced from their traditional lands by European settlers and prevented from entering Alice Springs by racist policies. By the 1970s, they were formalised as town camps. There's often overcrowding, poor facilities and infrastructure. Then, a major policy put in place between around 1910 and 1970.
White missionaries have come among the coloured Aboriginals and are doing noble work in saving the blacks from themselves.
Australian government agencies and church missions forcibly removed thousands of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children from their families to get them to assimilate.
The darkness of ignorance has been banished by the bright light of faith.
They were placed with white families to merge into society. Frank was one of those children, removed from his mother at the age of 5. She was so traumatised that she spent the rest of her life in a mental institution.
It's my mother. I thought about all my lifetime. I couldn't accept any sorry thing after what's happened to me and my mother.
This is known as the stolen generation, and its traumatic impact is still felt by communities across Australia.
The child protection system was built to remove Aboriginal children from their families and has not moved from that.
Then, in 2007, the Northern Territory Intervention. This was an Australian federal government initiative aimed at combating alleged child sexual abuse in Aboriginal communities.
I fear that there'd be another case of stolen generation children because they'll be taken away from their mothers and fathers and grandparents and uncles and aunties.
And it created fear and stigma in communities.
Australia was told all Aboriginal men were pedophiles. That's what they heard. That is what Australians heard.
The intervention didn't save one child. It demonised communities and made people feel lesser citizens of this country.
New dads felt like they couldn't change children's nappies anymore. Like, this is really horrific stuff. Men stopped bathing babies, they stopped helping out because what they heard was, if you do those things, you're a pedophile and you're going to get locked up and your children are going to get taken away.
Leaders in the community say that very rarely do they get consulted on decisions that impact them, and that over history, policies have harmed Aboriginal families, taken control away from communities and perpetuated racism. Today, there is still a huge disparity. Indigenous children are 12 times more likely than non-Indigenous children to be taken into care, and 27 times more likely to end up in prison. That track record creates a difficult tension. There are some who argue authorities might worry about being seen to remove Indigenous children from their homes, even when there are legitimate welfare risks.
No child should lose their life because governments lack the courage to act.
This week, the Northern Territory Child Protection Minister Robin Kyle said there would be a review into the Territory's child protection system, as well as reforms.
I will not be a minister who abandons yet another generation of Territory kids.
But Aboriginal organisations have criticised the move, accusing the NT government of once again portraying Aboriginal communities as a risk to children's safety. In the case of Kumanjayi Little Baby, her family were vulnerable, but they had nothing to do with their baby's death. Her death has been very painful for people here. I spoke to one woman the other day who said the community was feeling numb, but it's also brought into sharp focus the inequalities here, the systems that were meant to protect Kumanjayi Little Baby but absolutely failed.
The biggest protective factor you can offer Aboriginal children is contact with their families. Her family did not fail her. Her family did not fail her.
It's been pretty quiet whilst we've been here, partly because of a thing called sorry business, which is a period of collective mourning where people take part in cultural practices and ceremonies. They don't want to talk, they want to focus on the family of Kumanjayi Little Baby. The message that comes out loud and clear is the importance of family, of community, and listening to Aboriginal people.
And I think honesty and being honest as politicians, that we've all failed here. And what do we all need to do to try and fix this?
It becomes a political grab, it becomes a headline instead of actually talking to community and finding out what's going on.
Communities have the solution and we need to listen to what people are saying.